Always really excited when I get to pick guy's brain. Hockey Night, NHL on Sportsnet, 2 times again. Owner of the best shooting percentage, NHL history. It's Craig Simpson. What's up, man?
Good morning. How are you doing?
Because, the sun is shining. The Maple Leafs are winning hockey games, like a lot of them, against the bad teams, which is, something that doesn't always happen.
No, you're right. It has been in the past, one of their weaknesses of not being able to get the points when you need them. But it's been a good little run that they've been able to put some games together, and no surprise that they're sitting at this point feeling a little bit better about themselves than they were, say, a week and a half ago, right?
Yeah. It turns out that you can count on death and taxes and the Toronto Maple Leafs ending up in one of the spots in the Atlantic Division that ends up in a playoff spot and grinding their way to a divisional matchup in the playoffs, but not finishing first. It's the more things change, the more things stay the same. Okay, but this season has been different. And recently, with this stretch of play, there's been a lot of talk about the Morgan Rielly incident and what that has done for this team. And William Nylander had this quote yesterday: "We've answered the bell. I think Mo lit a fire in the team. Yes, we're battling for Mo." End quote. Are you actually noticing a different Maple Leafs team over this stretch? And if so, how much of it is them versus how much of that is the strength of competition that they've played?
I don't think you can sort of debate the strength of competition because you just look at the season and it unfolds the way the schedule allows it to, right? Mm-hmm. You can't pick and choose who you want to play on a given week. And, I think at times you go through a stretch that sometimes you look at your schedule and go, this is going to be a tough week, and maybe you play your absolute best hockey, or vice versa. As you were just saying off the top, sometimes it looks like, these are guaranteed point nights, and it doesn't go your way. So I do think, though, the one thing, if any team that I've been on, whether as a player or when I was coaching, you look at times where you go, we've got some real challenges ahead, whether it's injuries or whether it's suspension about with Morgan's. Mm-hmm. There are times when you can just tell that it galvanizes the team, and it shows that guys realize, okay, we're not going to let this week, which it quite frankly could have, derail a whole season, right? Mm-hmm. There are critical times where you look at your team and you go, what are we, and what can we be, and how good can we push our game to a level? And whether it's the fact that Morgan's actions ignited them, or the fact that he got suspended probably more than most would have thought the number was going to be. I just think that it's one of those critical times where you get a chance to see what you have in your organization, what you have with your top guys, and if guys can rally around each other and play their best hockey. And I think you look at that schedule and you say, I don't think you ever want to debate, okay, well, what's the strength of schedule during that time? You go, no. They're critical points after a disappointing loss a week and a bit ago on a Saturday night in Ottawa. Mm-hmm. And instead of folding, suddenly, you go 3-0 on a homestand and you start a 4-game road trip with a big win. So I do think that there's no question that it's made an impact on them.
Yeah, okay. So that's what I'm trying to suss out here, though, is because, yes, they absolutely deserve credit for getting these wins because we've hammered them. And by we, I mean me. I've done it. I've hammered them relentlessly when they've had these egg-laying games against terrific teams. Like my partner on Leafs Talk reminded me the other day that last season, at the very beginning of the year, they lost a game to the Anaheim Ducks on the road, and it was a nightmare zone, right? It was, okay, Sheldon Keefe sat Marner, and is he fired, and is everybody done? And is this the worst Leafs team we've ever seen? It was a bad time. I said at one point this year that the measuring stick games for the Leafs were against the bad opponents because they've proven that they can elevate. They haven't proven that consistently they can just go out there and beat the bad teams. We know from analytics, and this goes across all sports, that the way that they usually measure the best teams is the gap between them and the bad, whether they actually put the pedal down and rather than lower competition and kind of let them hang around and end up having 1-goal games. They're winning in regulation. There's a lot of positive markers for this team. I guess if we're in agreement that something is different, I'd like to know from your educated eye what you're seeing from them right now that has actually materially changed from the group that we've been seeing, say, the weeks prior or before the Morgan Rielly incident.
Well, a few things. Loaded question, I guess, a bit, because there's always little factors, whether it's a great individual performance that might win you a game that maybe you wouldn't have before. So, when you got your top guy scoring 35 goals in his last 31 games, you've got a that tends to the old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Yeah. And that has a tendency to help you. But I think they're getting performances through the key positions that maybe they weren't before. I've said the biggest concern I've had with this group is that they haven't had that secondary offense or secondary scoring. And I think I said it 2 games ago with just take a guy like Bobby McMahon. Does he not look like a different player than the one maybe 3 weeks ago that would have been in the same situation and probably wouldn't have scored? So I do think that there's been some growth in the play of guys that like you watch the team and you say, if you don't get that kind of production out of those types of players come playoff time, you're not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so I do think there's been a push of the needle in the middle ground guys that say, can I trust this guy to play? Can he contribute in key moments? On the back end without Morgan, again, you've got, Benoit and McCabe playing pretty darn well together. Liljegren, he makes some mistakes, gets beat out of some battles in the corner, but overall, you're just relying numbers. You say, he's contributing with some offense and playing a significant role there. So I just think that's the ups and downs of a season where you're going to be challenged and different guys are going to be challenged at different times. And this has been a stretch that from the goaltenders out as well have been able to come through and play a significant role in those wins.
Yeah, you're right. And it is, it's a complicated answer because it is a team sport, and truly, like, it's right. And there are so many things, like, they pointed out on the broadcast yesterday, you guys mentioned, like, Samsonov has the 3rd highest save percentage in the NHL since he returned.
Go figure. Yeah, can you imagine that? Like 2 months ago, would you have ever said that?
No, honestly, it's one of the more shocking sports stories that I can remember in terms of just one individual athlete in such a short period of time, right? Like, we've seen comeback stories before from other athletes, and guys have bounced back from stuff, but in my lifetime, I'm having trouble remembering where it's gone from you're completely unplayable, people think that you're going to, like, straight up be in the KHL, that you'll never play another game for the Maple Leafs, to, you look like a top 10 goaltender again, and everything's completely normal and fine. And
usually it's not within the same
a week,
year or month or 2 months, right?
Yeah.
You need some rehabilitation,
right,
both mentally, physically, all that. And let's not kid ourselves. It's not like that is not going to be a story going forward. You never know. But I do feel you've got to give some credit where credit's due. I would go right from the top with Brad Treliving on this one. Yeah. In terms of, I've heard Sheldon reference it probably 5 or 6 times, talking about his plan. And it's hard to pull a guy away who's struggling so mightily that, as you just said, it looked like this guy's never going to play in the NHL again. No. Forget about for the Leafs. And not send them to play anywhere. Like, it's a good reminder at times, the things you need to work on sometimes are really only between the ears, and you got to spend an enormous amount of time making sure you can get that turned back around, and then go worry about being back on the ice again. And it's a good reminder. And let's face it, let's hope it's a good story that continues going forward in a positive way.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are rooting for him. And, I have to come on here every day and give my opinion on things. But it is a good reminder for me not to just say it's over. And I'm glad I had Kelly Rudy on last week, and his perspective as a former player, where he's like, who has had struggles, who had his career, he's like, yeah, no, this happened to me. I was like, oh, right, this did happen to you. Yeah. But he's like, Trey Living handled it perfectly. It's like, no, you weren't going to put him down in the AHL. My dumb brain, non-player, goes, well, if you're not going to play him on an AHL team, then what does that say about him? And he's like, nothing. You don't want to put him behind AHL defenders. If he can't face the media, what does that say about him and the way that the team feels about him? It turns out nothing, that they've got a good feel for it, and they just want the guy to be out of the limelight for a little bit. They do deserve a lot of credit if it works out for them. You know what's a little wild about him, though, is he's playing great. You mentioned it, credit where credit's due. I think he could finish this season playing this well, and yet when it comes to contract time, I think it would still represent an incredibly difficult question for this team.
Absolutely. I mean, there's always layers, right, to every piece, and quite frankly, at this point, that's a whole nother hurdle that you'll try to jump over in a long time. And I think right now you still have to, even as a teammate, you're trying to build right now. They got 28 games left. You're building in your mind now. You've gone from season, start, energy, get in the middle, get a little bit of a grind, all-stars over. Now you're like, listen, you're looking at the standings every day as a player and go, where are we going to finish? What are we going to do? How are we playing? Like, to me, in this time as a player, you're going, what are we as a team? Can we trust each other? Are we building enough that we can feel confident that we do have a team that can come together and go on a bit of a run? Can we deal with adversity together? And I think it's a huge time to try to force yourself to grow together as a team to see what you can be. And so I do think when you look at a guy like Samsonov, and then listen, Lowell was a great story early on, but I don't think you can be confident in saying that he's going to be the guy going through, because what have you seen from him for 2.5 months? What's that going to be like coming back? So I think you do really have to just focus on the guys who are there and around and say, how can we come together and build and grow? And hopefully, I don't mind this team being a bit of not a struggling team. I think I said it early in the year, I think some struggles and learning how to win when you're not playing your best, or learning how to win when you're a little shorthanded, will serve this team well, because I think that's probably the mindset you have to have come playoff time, that, maybe even you might not be the best team, but have you as a group learned how to be comfortable when you're not playing your best, to stay in a game and find a way to win some tight ones? And there's been some good examples of that, which I quite frankly think serve you well going into a playoff mode.
Yeah, that's really interesting when we're reflecting on the stretch without Morgan Rielly. And again, the teams, whatever, the situations, whatever. But the fact that there has been some kind of bonding between the group and feeling of us against the world, and what do we do when some chips are down, because they've clearly added some stakes to this run of play, that for them to come through during it, that maybe that actually does mean something later on.
Oh, 100% it does. And I think that's, now you've got a group of guys that, much talked about. They've had their share of failures, right? And I mean, failures are only playoffs. Regular season doesn't matter how good you are there. When you lose first round for 6 of your first 7 years as those core guys, that's all that sticks with you. I don't care if you're a 115-point team or what Boston did last year. What sticks with you is the playoff pain. So I think it's learning and growing of what kind of team do we have to be when it matters the most. And to me, being a part of two really good teams and Stanley Cup winning teams in Edmonton, it's the collection of guys, some of the guys in 1990 that had come and had not been a part of winning a Stanley Cup, grew along the way and learned how this team had to play and what you needed to do as a player. It doesn't always mean that you're going to score, but you have to do key things throughout, big times in a game, and be comfortable in those moments. And that's what a regular season like this one, when guys are playing an elevated role and learning how to play those big minutes, or quite frankly, sometimes it's how do you survive a 1.5 or 2-minute shift where you're hemmed in your own zone. That might win you a playoff game if you understood how now to play and to react in those situations. And quite frankly, you got to get the opportunity to do it in the regular season and learn how to play like that.
Can I be honest though? That part of their game, I don't think that it's yeah. I don't.
Not good enough
yeah,
yet.
No,
is what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't love that part of their game. I don't really like the hey, they were hemmed in and here's an opportunity to win a board battle and just chip a puck. It's like that part has been pretty frustrating this year. Don't turn it over. Oh, they turned it over. Oh, damn it. Okay, so I know we're talking a lot about the collective and the team and how this can operate from a level of getting everybody involved, but has there ever been a year with this core where Auston Matthews has meant more to the Leafs' success?
Oh boy, probably not. No, and I'm not sure if I said it yesterday or I've been thinking it going into each game. What impressed me the most probably with him this year, and I just mentioned he's got 34 goals or 5 goals, whatever it is,
35 and 32.
Yeah. But prior to those 32 games, he had 1 goal in 9 games. Mm-hmm. And I think what impressed me the most and what I would say about the growth of the guy, and obviously he's had a great career from start to finish anyway, but I didn't recognize much of a different look in the player and didn't recognize any different way he was playing when he scored 1 in 9 as opposed to these 34 and 31, right? Like he's not the guy that is smashing sticks and frustrated. He's not cheating the game when he wasn't scoring in those 9 games. He didn't look anything different, his mannerisms. And I think that the consistency and the calmness and the sort of business-like manner is really impressive. And I think having watched him from his rookie season on, he is a guy that plays at both ends of the ice with energy and vigor. And, he's not a guy that cheats the game defensively to try to get offense. And I think this year's version of Auston Matthews is probably maybe even the best example of that in terms of, still committed to coming back and back checking and turning pucks over, and he strips guys of the puck without taking penalties. All the little details of the game. I just think he's in his wheelhouse, per se, as you would say, about how he feels about the way he's playing. And then on top of that, when he's shooting the puck, he's putting it in the back of the net. So it's been a pretty darn impressive run by the way he's playing. So
he's certainly a complete player. And yes, I love especially that element of his game, his ability to turn guys over. And, he's often criticized for not being physical enough given his size. But there is something about, the way he uses his size defensively,
sure. Yep.
that is kind of physically imposing on other players. Like you can really feel it when he's on the forecheck and he's on somebody and they're trying to elude him, and you're like, ooh, you're not
getting through that very easily. Yeah,
right. And so there's probably a little bit more that he doesn't get credit for. But yes, complete player, guy who's scoring a ton this year. Is the consistency of play, though, the biggest difference to you? Or is there some evolution in his goal scoring specifically that you're seeing that, like, again, he's always been a great goal scorer. He's had 50 in 50 games, not to start, but in a stretch before in his career. He's hit these markers before. But is there something that you're seeing from him from an evolutionary standpoint or an adjustment standpoint with the scoring that is giving us this, where it's just multi-goal games basically every single night?
Yeah, I think his release and his, we showed a graphic yesterday where he's got like 13 goals from that far right side, which is kind of unique. At times you're even looking saying, he's kind of out of the play. Well, I think being out of the play and being able to get lost, I use as a great right-handed shooter, Brett Hall was a guy that didn't want, when the play is cycling in the zone, get lost, get out of the traffic, get out of the goaltender's vision in mind, and then, boom, the puck's coming to you and it's in the back of the net. And I think Austin's release point, to me, seems like he's been able to adjust early on, maybe going a little bit more high and then going 5-hole. Now, if you look at 4 of his last 5 goals have been under the glove, as opposed to, I mentioned, and if you have Kelly on again, ask him. One of the hardest movements for a goaltender is to push your glove down, right? Because you think of yourself as a reflex. A reflex is like coming up with your arm, not pushing it down. And he changes his release point. He changes his delivery of where he's putting it. And I just think that, one of the things in some of the one-timers he's made, I've made the comment, he's not worried about how hard he puts it. He's worried about where he puts it in the quick release point. And those two factors are things that you have to trust as a shooter to know, guys who aren't great goal scorers or confident, sometimes you've seen just throw the puck on net, try to get it there as hard as you can. Well, it doesn't matter if you're not putting it to an area. If you're just putting it back to the goaltender's pad, you're not accomplishing anything. And I think time and again, when he gets in tight, it's that release point and where he's putting it and the confidence he has to put it exactly where he needs to has probably grown more this year than even in years past. And even maybe in, the 60-goal year he had 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now they've got 2 games coming up against Arizona, who, I set the total at 3.5 is the.
Well, he's got to get his 50th here in Arizona, right? I always laugh at Chris Cuthbert because he loves lists and big moments, and he's like, I look at this week. There's no question he's getting it in Phoenix.
Yeah, so he better have a good one. He's had time to prepare. Okay, he's had time to prepare. No pressure, Chris. You got to have one. So. The other part of this, though, too, and this has been a constant with him, it's not as much like about what he is doing because you outlined in great detail what you think those things are. But do you think Mitch Marner is getting enough credit for the success right now?
It's been an interesting year for Mitch. Mm-hmm. He probably hasn't been as wrong use of the word, but noticeable. Like he hasn't been sort of the guy who's been stirring the drink, and you think of Mitch, his 7 years, he's led the team in assists, and not to be unnoticed. He was 8 assists behind Nylander, about 2-3 weeks ago, and now all of a sudden, right again, back at the top of leading this team in assists again. So, I do think you get accustomed to him being the driver in a lot of cases. I think that, year by year, you look and say, how do you handle the times where maybe you're not getting the easy points or maybe your game's not completely intact? But I think he's, like much of the team, has grown over the last little while. And, I just think he's learning how to be a contributing player every night you don't always have to have the points. And every year is not going to be one where they come easy. I don't think they came easy early on. I think they're starting to come more noticeably like you're accustomed to seeing him being able to gather points on a nightly basis. Mm-hmm. But I think, again, not a bad thing for him to have gone through. Like it's a relative term struggle, right? Like Bertuzzi, if he struggles for 20 games, can't score, you're not getting many points. I think with a guy like Marner, you're saying, it kind of looks like he's struggling lately. Well, it might just be a point per game or 10 in the last 12, So there's relative terms to struggle. But I think his game's coming together at the right time, too. I think he's feeling better about his ability to control the game and the way he's playing again. And, again, I think this is a year where in your mind, some struggles during the year are not a bad thing, and I think it'll serve them better going into the playoffs, having gone through them during the regular season.
Yeah, no, I think that's bang on. And I do think that earlier on in the season he was especially far less noticeable. Lately, it's been much better, and it's been a lot of pillows for Matthews. On you're looking at I think it's 21 primary assists on Matthews' goals.
Right. Well, how many times have I said he finds him again? Yeah. Right. As soon as he gets the puck, he delays and buys some time. And if I was playing with him, I played with a guy by the name of Gretzky that I remember trying to describe to somebody. It's like if you're playing in your beer league game and you're going, if this guy had seen me, I'd be, I'm wide open. Why doesn't he see me? Well, you play in a practice and you go, oh man, I'm wide open and puck's between my legs and I missed it because the pass is already there. There's a guy that'll find you every time. And I think Mitch is very much like that kind of guy. And if I was Auston, you go, that's why they're such a great tandem because he knows where he needs to get lost and then get into the opening, and Mitch has a great ability to find him.
See, this is going to be the real point of fascination for me come playoff time, because the point's been made over and over again that Matthews doesn't have any goals in Game 7s, and he disappeared in the Panther series. And yeah, all the chances they got, and they make that abundantly clear whenever they lose these games, is that they had chances. But like, that's not the point. What I really want to see is this actually I don't want to say conclusion, but the ultimate version of these two guys with their chemistry? Because to me, that's what chemistry is when you're figuring out just exactly that amount of patience that Mitch has to find him for those passes, to find him in those sweet spots over and over again. Like, even on the power play, when he's ripping some of those, it's like the time and the space and where he is on some of these things, it's just perfect. And the opponent looks completely helpless in so many of these situations. And if this continues between these two guys, I do think that Matthews actually has a real shot at hitting 70 goals. But the bigger one is going to be, does it translate into the playoffs, and does all of a sudden those two guys actually dominate their minutes against their opponents? Because if that happens, then people are going to start to believe on a real run.
Right. And honestly, at this stage in this age where they are, you get into your 8th year in the league, and you've done everything offensively that you wanted to accomplish early on, and that changes each and every year, and you try to set new goals and all that. But listen, I think they're understanding enough, mature enough, have one taste of winning a round. Okay, that's great, but then back to the disappointment of losing the next one in fashion that you just mentioned, not being able to do the key things in a series when you need them. I just think that it's part of the maturity. It's part of the growth. You hope that your team grows the way that you grow as an individual player. But let's face it, if you're going to have success, those core guys and key players at that critical age and the right timing have to learn how to play at that level when it matters the most. And there's the biggest thing as an athlete that you're trying to accomplish, both individually and then collectively as a team, is, can I be known for a guy who can play his best hockey when it matters the most? And let's face it, that's come playoff time, and it's a different game. And I think part of the maturity you have as a player at the age that these guys are now, you realize that's all that matters now. I mean, you have to get to the destination point by having a good regular season. But to me, even if I'm Auston Matthews gets 70 goals, deep in your mind, it's about, well, what am I going to do mid-April through June, and hopefully I can accomplish those goals, because that's really all that matters.
Hey, Craig, this was really insightful stuff. I always really appreciate the time, and enjoy watching Auston Matthews rip his 50th goal tomorrow night in Arizona.
You can listen to Chris talk about it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I will. Take care, man. Thanks for the time.